This is gonna be another interview with the late, with the great Neely Fuller Jr.
Black nationalism, and even what it means to be black. In your view, do black people constitute a race of people?
Well, according to compensatory counter-racist logic, uh, no. The answer would be no.
Okay. Could you explain why, according to your view, according to counter-racist logic, black people do not constitute a race of people?
Because they shouldn't. They were told that they were a race. Black people were told, as far as I know, from with the information I've been able to acquire over a period of years, I see no reason to believe that black people ever called themselves a race. And that is the correct thing, to not be categorized as a race of people. The reason being, race is racism. The only purpose for being a member of a race is to practice racism. If you think about it logically, the only reason for being a member of a race is to practice racism. So lots of things that people can be members of, but to be a member of a race, logically speaking, would be to practice racism. Then what would racism be? Racism would be to mistreat people based on color. That's the only value that it has. Doesn't have any other value. Now, people can be members of a family, they can be members of a tribe, they can be members of a community, they can be members of associations, fraternities, sororities, just groupings, maybe, that have no particular name except they have a mission. So the only mission for being a member of a race, logically speaking, would be to practice racism. And racism serves no purpose other than to mistreat people based on color, logically speaking. So black people didn't call themselves a race, according to all the records that I've been able to look into. They were told that they were a race. Told by whom? By the people who believe in racism. And they are the people who believe in white supremacy. They categorize people by race because it would serve their purposes. Their purposes means that they themselves would categorize themselves as a race, the white race, or the white nation, and or the general formal, informal title of white supremacists. And therefore, they would dominate all other people and categorize these people by whatever they saw fit that would be work well for the system of white supremacy.
We've had quite a few folks, guests and listeners, who have asserted that, before racism and white supremacy existed, black people ruled the earth peacefully in a just manner. They had dominion over the earth, and they did reference themselves as black, and that there's evidence of this, there's books of this, that they reference themselves as black, were proud to be black, that, some folks have even said some of these people were black nationalists. What would you say to that?
Well, the only reason for being a black nationalist is that you're opposing somebody. The reason for being a nationalist in anything, in any sense, is that you are in opposition to someone who is not of your nation. That's the only reason. To call yourself, a member of a black nationalist nation, you're putting emphasis on black nationalism, which means I'm black and I'm opposed to someone who isn't. Otherwise, you wouldn't have to put an emphasis on being black. You would just say that, well, we are a group of people who do the things that a group of people should be doing in this universe, because we are in a universe. But when people start thinking in a narrow sense, they start thinking in terms of, well, the people of the river opposing the people who are of the mountain or of the valley, or the people who are over yonder. And there were conflicts, as far as I know, all down the line. Now, that may or may not have been true, because of these are things that I was just told. I haven't been here for just a handful of years. I understand that people have been around for possibly, some people say, millions of years. So for me to say that I know for certain what happened all during those millions of years and who did what, I don't know that. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time trying to find out. I think that the best approach is to try to think about, or that's at least the assignment that I have assigned myself, because I think the assignment was given, to try to find out what people are supposed to be doing with the little time that they have here. And I don't think time is well spent with the short time that people do exist on the planet now. I don't think time is well spent if we spend too much time. We spend a little bit of time trying to find out everything that ever happened 40 trillion years ago, because that might take 40 trillion years, and there's not that much time available. So if we're going to research history, I think it's logical to think in terms of finding just enough history to find out where the mistakes were made that got the world in the mess that it's in now. To concentrate on where the mistakes are, and then concentrate on formulas to correct these mistakes. Because apparently everyone, somewhere along the line, made some colossal errors. And addressing the system of white supremacy, the white supremacists, the people who became white supremacists, made an error when they decided to become white supremacists. The victims of white supremacy made an error when they allowed themselves to become victims. That was a mistake. Now, they were all this smart, that wouldn't have happened. So they weren't very smart when they allowed this to happen. So I don't think that it serves time and effort, time and energy very well. The time and energy that all of the people who are here now have been given to dwell on who was the big person in history and who was the little person in history, and get in shouting matches ad infinitum about that. I think that it's best to look at how things are right this minute and look at what the position everybody is in right this minute and make an assessment as to whether everything is the way it ought to be right this minute. And if we find things that are not the way they ought to be right this minute, then come up with formulas to make it the way it ought to be right this minute. And then keep it that way from now on, and don't let it get off track, if it ever was on track.
Mm-hmm.
That's logic.
I wanted to make sure I didn't miss something that you shared. I felt that was very important. You said we are in a universe, and I've heard you give lectures before where you say the goal should be to become universal man, universal woman, practitioners of justice, because we are in a universe. And you said that nationalism tends to be kind of limited to thinking of a specific area of land or a specific spot on the planet. Do you think that could be evidence of racism, white supremacy, and trying to get black people to have a very small, limited view of the world? I think that's part of the term niggerish, niggerish thinking, very small-minded thinking.
Yes, the white supremacists always think in terms of borders, and they've gotten everybody else locked into that, where everybody's looking for some little border, some little patch that they can say, well, this is mine, this is my turf, like gangs do in the cities. Very narrow thinking, not looking at the entire world, not looking at the entire universe, which there are trillions of stars out there. I mean, it's a pretty big enterprise, whatever put this together. Some people call it God, Jehovah, Allah, the Great Spirit, the Big Bang. But the people who are here now don't know anything about who actually got that in motion, where they can prove that they know and actually do the job themselves, which would be pretty valid proof. I don't think there's anybody walking the planet now that can tell you everything that there is to know about every grain of sand that's on every planet right this minute, about every spark that's showing somewhere in what they call outer space, every so-called black hole that's suddenly disappearing and then reappearing somewhere else. I don't think there's anybody on the planet that knows exactly what all of that is about in fine detail, right down to the smallest grain of sand floating out in space. Because to be a creator, that's what the qualification would be. Something created all of that. Something, someone, some person. Some people say it's a person or persons. And some people say that it's just a matter out there that did it. But the people who are on this planet now, I don't think anyone has stepped forward and claimed they know everything about everything, everywhere, every minute. They know what every person's thought is going to be before they even think it. I don't think anyone is making that claim. So having said that, it means the people here on this planet now are pretty weak-minded people compared to all the things that could be known. So no one should get puffed up and start talking about, well, I'm going to count out a few hundred miles and make that my borders. And anybody who looks at me sideways, I mean, they might have a problem with me if they look across my border. That's pretty shallow thinking in a universe that's been given to everybody by whatever created the universe. So we should be thinking universally. Universal man, universal woman, and trying to qualify for that. Because as it stands now, no one comes anywhere near qualifying for what logically would be a universal man and a universal woman. Not one. No person on the planet comes anywhere clear, anywhere near that. First of all, they don't know enough. We're pretty ignorant people. Everybody on the planet is ignorant compared to what? Compared to all the things that could be known and understood about every grain of sand that's floating around in outer space right now. But maybe everybody is capable of doing that. We don't know. We don't know how far the mind can go. But we do know that we are not creators. We are people who arrange things that have been created by something greater than all of us. And we shouldn't forget that for 2 seconds.
Context of white supremacy, Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I did want to check one thing because I have heard folks in discussions on racism, white supremacy, and they said, I would like to replace white supremacy with justice, and then they believe that, black people do constitute a race, and that they would like black people to be able to preserve black culture and Asian people to be able to preserve Asian culture and so on and so forth. Do you think, there would be a value in black people being able to preserve black culture, quote unquote, after white supremacy has been vanquished?
I don't know, because I would have to ask, what does black culture consist of? What does Asian culture consist of? We're talking about justice and correctness, meaning balance between people and balance between people and things. That's justice and correctness. Justice is balance between people, which means guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. That's the compensatory definition that I have given it. Somebody might come up with a better definition, in which case that should be adopted. And correctness means balance between people and things other than people, but including people. Rocks, trees, water, air. Because all of these things are out of balance. And the white supremacists, being destructive like they are, building up to destroy, that's their philosophy, have thrown everything out of balance, and are, if it was thrown out of balance already, they believe in keeping it that way. They don't like things in balance. If things look like they're trying to get in balance, they will immediately move to cause a disruption because they like disruption. They like confusion. They have proven that. They don't like things to be orderly because it doesn't give them a lot to do. And they have to have a lot to do to keep their egos going, which is what it's really all about. That's what the system of white supremacy is all about. It's an ego trip. This idea of royalism. Holier than thou. I can do no wrong. I'm right about everything. I'm mistake-proof. And last but not least, I should dominate anybody who I perceive as being about just a little bit weaker than I am. Beat up on them. Laugh at them. Persecute them. Dislocate them. Make fun of them. And call it life. And say this is the way it ought to be forever. Now, that's not qualifying anybody to be universal man or universal woman. Both the people who are doing this type of thing, the white supremacists themselves, and their victims. And their victims shouldn't aspire to do the same type thing, which we have been told by the white supremacists that that's the biggest thing we should aspire to. We should be trying to go much further than that. Make the world a much better place than it ever has been by anybody. Not try to go back to anything, because there's no record that I know about that you can go back to where people didn't make mistakes on a colossal scale. And we don't want to recycle that. Whether it's black people doing it or white people doing it or any people from so-called outer space doing it. We don't want that kind of imbalance anymore, ever, in a universe that's crying for balance. That's the logic. That's the compensatory logic. That's the counter-racist logic.
I wanted to, I wanted to ask, I've heard this from a lot of people, all the way back when you were on the program last time in February. I've heard black people say that they do not like your perspective that we should be saying replace white supremacy with justice. They think it would be more accurate and more constructive to replace white supremacy with black power. They have said that the concept of justice, that's just a cliche, and that doesn't really get to the heart of the matter in terms of black people needing to oppose white people and deal with the white people who believe in and practice racism, white supremacy. What would your response be to folks who say that, we shouldn't be saying replace white supremacy with justice, we should replace white supremacy with black power and or black nationalism?
Well, now, the black people who say that, they're saying the code requires me, because they have VGQ, which is Victims Guaranteed Qualification, to say what they want to say. That's according to the code. See, I can't argue against that because I'm a victim. If that's the way they see their victimization, or even if they don't call themselves victims, then they can try what they think will work best for everybody who is concerned, or for the people that they just think that should be worked for. There are black people who believe in spending their time joining a gang and going around killing other black people. And all I can say is I don't think that that's the most constructive view, and that's nothing new, and it hasn't improved conditions here on the planet. But there are plenty of people out there, and quite a few thousands, who are looking forward to discontinuing what they consider to be a black tradition. Join a gang, kill black people, slaughter as many of them as you can, over what they consider you're not on the correct street. It's my street. I just declared it this morning as mine. And if I see you over here on this street, I have a duty to kill you. And then I feel good about myself. Now, the white supremacist philosophy is that type of philosophy. I don't think it serves this planet very well for anybody to think on that level, regardless of who it is. But there are those who think that that's the level that should be continued because it is a tradition. It is a culture that is well established, and that is something that people can really look forward to doing, that they can guarantee that can be done. The production of justice can be done. It may not. But a lot of things that people say it couldn't be done have been proven that they could be done in the little time I've been on this planet. I've heard people say, back in the 1940s, I heard people say in barbershop arguments that no one would ever make an airplane that could fly 600 miles an hour, that it would come apart in the air. These were people who knew what they were talking about while they were cutting hair. Can't be done. Absolutely impossible. Cars can't go but about 100 miles an hour, maybe 2 if you stretch it. Airplane, 600 miles an hour, forget it. People saying that with absolute conviction. Ready to argue infinitum, ad infinitum, about that point. Little by little, someone came along and said, I'm not paying any attention to what people say can't be done. So all down through history, it's always someone who steps forward and says, I'm going to do what everybody has agreed can't be done. And I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do it in record time. And some of the people who were saying these things will get on an airplane and sit on the front seat and feel very comfortable doing 600 miles an hour, and that's the very person that said it couldn't be done. First one on the airplane. It's always happened down through history.
Context of white supremacy. Again, we are broadcasting live at waronthehorizon.com and Blog Talk Radio. Check out the broadcast. Thank you for listening in. I just wanted to make sure I'm being clear. I thought I've heard you say previously in lectures that most of the things that folks reference as black culture generally can be classified as a pretty pitiful response to racism and white supremacy. Did I hear you correctly when you were referencing that?
Well, I've asked people in seminars down through the years. I put the 2 words on the board because that's how you do things in a scientific and a structured manner so that people can at least understand what you're talking about.
Yes, sir.
I try to get people to understand what I'm talking about. Maybe I don't do the best job. In fact, I'm absolutely certain I don't do the best job. But I try. Now, you do things in a systematic manner if you want to accomplish things. I think that's the best way to set up some type of system for doing so. And you have details in that system. So I have put the 2 words on a board where there were audiences and invited people to make comments. And the 2 words were black culture. And then I would maybe enumerate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and just leave blank space there. Say, okay, give me, anybody in the audience, give me 5 or 6 elements just to start off with of what you refer to as black culture. Now, someone in most places, and I've tried this in maybe a half a dozen places, it was always at the top of the list, right off the top, music. So I would put music on the board. First thing in black culture, music, M-U-S-I-C. Then I would turn around and face the audience. Okay, anybody like to try something else? Silence. That's as far as we got. And even the music was not explanatory, because what's music to one person is noise to another. So what's so special about the music of black people that would cause people to do things that need doing? That would be my question. You know, if it's black music, I mean, it must be unique, but not only unique, but when you listen to it, it causes people to do things that really need doing, really ought to be done, that the world absolutely has to have it, like food. Otherwise, things are a mess without it. I tend not to believe that, even though it might be true. But things are kind of messed up in spite of it. So it must be some other elements that go into black culture. Maybe the music does help. I'm not talking against that, because I don't really have a definition for black music anyway. I've heard a lot of sounds that people call black music, but I think sound. And some sounds sound very similar to so-called sounds that other people have made or arranged. I like to call it arranged because sound came with the universe. Black people don't make sound. White people don't make sound. Sound came with the universe. So you arrange sounds. You don't make sound. You don't create sound. Sound is here. You just arrange the sounds that are already here. Unless I've been misinformed by logic. Logically speaking, sound is already in the universe. Otherwise, you could hit a drum and nothing. You wouldn't hear anything. So I don't know of anybody who claimed that they invented sound. They arrange the sounds that are already here. Now, when you hear the sound, what does the sound make you do? And like I have said in many a talk, based on compensatory logic, everything in the universe is either constructive or non-constructive. These are the two categories. There's no category in between. So if I hear a certain sound, and that sound inspires me to do something constructive, then that's what logic tells me is music. If it inspires me to do something non-constructive, like go and tear up something that shouldn't be torn up, or shoot somebody who shouldn't be shot, then that's not music, that's noise. That's the only measure according to compensatory logic or any other logic. But I call it compensatory because I'm just presenting it that way. But let's go back to the board. Number one, blacker. Now, this is not just any culture. This is black culture, meaning this is something that only black people do. And the world needs it. Absolutely must have it. Total requirement. Existence is nothing without it. So you put music, number one, on there. I never got any farther than that. Maybe when other people tried, maybe we can get to number 2, and maybe number 3, and number 4.
Spirituality.
No audience that I have ever talked to has gotten beyond music.
What about
everybody talks in generalities for the most part. I won't say everybody, but a lot of people talk in generalities. They'll just say, what we need is more black culture. But nobody stops to say, wait a minute, what is it? They'll say, well, it's things that black people do. Well, I hope that wouldn't include everything that I see black people doing. With that kind of label on it as black culture, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But let's go back to the specifics if we are going to say, now this is something that's really needed by anybody who's got any sense. So we put the music on there, even though that's argumentative. We'll put it on there anyway, and we'll get to the details later, just as a start. Then we move to number 2, and that would be what?
Rhythm.
Rhythm.
Yes, sir.
Well, that's a part of music. Rhythm, you know. You don't have to have instruments, rhythm. I mean, I guess that's rhythm when you walk. You walk with rhythm. But what's the purpose of walking? And where are you going when you're walking? And what are you going to do when you get there? See, all these factors come into what you call culture, because culture is what you do at the time that you're doing it. So if you're going to put a label on it and say, hey, everybody should drop their culture, or everybody shouldn't think that their culture is better than mine, because they need to stop and take a look at mine. Because whatever you see me doing, maybe you ought to check it out, because maybe that should be what you should be doing. And really, if it's really worth something, everybody should be doing it. Everybody should be copying everything that black people do. But I would not recommend that to anybody at this particular moment in history. I wouldn't recommend that to E.T.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay. We've also had a lot of discussions about black people who come to participate in different organizations to oppose or work against racism, white supremacy. But in actuality, these black people really have been sent by racist man and racist woman just, to spy and gather information and report back to the racists about what black people are doing. Do you have a codified view on what should be done to deal with different black people or non-white people who come to just serve racist man, racist woman, and reporting on what you're doing or saying?
I don't believe in secret meetings because there's no reason to. And then another thing, there's a codified expression. If 2 black people know it, it's not a secret. One of them's going to tell it. Now, that may or may not be true, but that is the basic and the safe and the logical position to take. Now, the second thing is, what do you need a secret for? You don't need secrets when you're trying to do the correct thing. You stand up before the whole world and say, this is what I'm trying to do, and this is the goal that I'm setting, and this is how I intend to do it. To tell the whole world that. Tell it to white people, tell it to non-white people. Why? Because you're trying to produce a product called justice. You're going to make an excuse. It's only when you're trying to do something that you shouldn't be doing you need secrets. The white supremacists believe in secrets because they have to be deceptive, and they have a treacherous agenda. Counter-racism is not treachery. It's cleaning up mess. And you stand before the whole world at high noon and announce it. This is where I'm going, and this is how I intend to get there. Now, does anybody have a problem with it? Because if they have a problem with it, sorry about that. I'm going anyway. Unquote. So what's all the secrecy about? patting people down in the door and all this type of stuff, and and sneaking around behind bushes. And well, who are you hiding from, and for what? You can't hide from the people that really got power because they know where you are. That's who you pay your rent to, the white supremacists. It's nothing that you do that they don't know about or can't find out. So when they send other black people around, you're down by the riverside, and you're saying what you got to say, you just welcome them down. Any white people show up, welcome them down too. So what? Saying what you got to say. Everybody just stand up and be counted. And be counted for doing what? The correct thing. You're trying to clean up mess. Why make an excuse for trying to clean up mess? It's not logical. They say, well, people who don't want the mess cleaned up will hurt you. Well, they can hurt you anyway. That goes with the territory. You stand up and say it anyway. I mean, we're saying it now. We're talking now. We're talking the same thing. Why do we need to hide in order to say what we're saying right this minute to the entire world? Well, that's really all we're saying. Replace racism with justice. The racists allow me to do that. They can kill me anytime. But they're not likely to do it until it starts taking effect. They don't care what black people do as long as it's not effective. That's why black people love to bunch together and pretend that they're doing something great. The white supremacists take one look and say they're just doing what they usually do, blowing off steam. And after they get through talking about what they're going to do to me and get tired of it, they're going to turn on each other before the meeting's over. Because we know them. We know them. We know how they think. We know what they're going to do before they even know. Because we're greater thinkers than they ever will be. We teach them what they know. They don't know anything except what we know. And what they do know, that we know, we taught them. So we don't really have to watch them that close. We just glance at them every now and then. Not worried about them. That's the white supremacist position. That's why they're supreme. They're not amateurs. They're real pros. They're big league. We haven't gotten off the side a lot.
Context of white supremacy, our guest, Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. If you would like to dial in, the phone line is 347-215-6071. Again, it's 347-215-6071. And the other line, if you would like to dial in, is 760-569-7676. And the code you will need is 948656. So that number again is 760-569-7676, and the code is 948656. Wow, I wanted to ask, since you just said, racist man and racist woman, they know they're victims, they're subjects, they have studied us, they know us very well, they teach us what we know. Has it been your observation that black people, we spend a significant amount of time looking back, and I think even racists from time to time encourage us to look back in history to find something to work against racism, white supremacy? Have you seen that? And do you see any evidence that is going to be successful in combating racism, reaching back to pick up some things that black people used to do to try to work against racism, white supremacy?
Whatever it was, it didn't work. And that's evident. Whatever it was, when the first person, whoever that was, got the idea of establishing a system of white supremacy, might have been a committee of people, might have been just one person just going around telling other people, we should start a system of racism. Somebody started it. That's evident. We see the results of it. When it started, how it started, I don't know. People argue about it. They write all kinds of books about it. I just tell the truth. I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know the name of the person or what his cousin's name was, any of that. I wasn't there. But I've heard different arguments about it. But somebody started it, and it turned out to be the most powerful idea that the world has ever seen, the idea of racism in the form of white supremacy. It's the most powerful religious and political idea ever thought of in recorded history. Why do I say it's the most powerful? Because it's powerful now. Now, somebody might say, naturally, people have said, oh, at one time, it didn't even exist. At one time, nothing existed. That's not the argument. That doesn't get you anything, to say at one time it doesn't exist, if you stop and think about it logically. Just suddenly just sitting down and say everything is just fine because at one time it didn't exist. That's not even inspirational. Because at one time, nothing existed, logically speaking. And something even brought nothing into existence. So what kind of frame of reference is that? So the purpose for studying history is to find out where the mistakes were made that brought the world into the kind of chaos like it is now. Where were the mistakes made? By whom? And try to do everything you can not to repeat those mistakes. Now, when people ask me, what is my history? I give a codified answer, what I call an argument settler, because that's what codification is supposed to be. You don't need a long argument. Just make one or two statements and that takes care of it. Not long speeches that go on and on and on and on and on. And the thing that I say is something logical and something that sounds like it's got to be true. Sounds like it's true. My history is everything that ever happened before the beginning of time and since. So it's nothing to brag about, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. Because I'm talking about everything that ever happened before the beginning of time and since. But since I have appeared here, I don't have anything to brag about, but I got plenty to be ashamed of. And what I should be ashamed of is having solved these problems in the time that I've been here. Because that's where that part of my history started. It started with me when I was born. But before I was born, that's my history too. Every rock that ever turned over on the moon, every shooting star that existed 80 trillion years ago is a part of my history. Why? Because it happened before I got here. It's 80 trillion years ago. That's my history. Why? Because it happened before I appeared in the universe. Now, a person might say, well, logically speaking, if you go that way, that's everybody's history. And I say, true. So now you're putting history in perspective. Yes, that's everybody's history. Now what you're going to do? History is everything that ever happened before you got here. Everything. Everybody who ever made a canoe. Everybody who ever chased a rabbit. Everybody who ever went to sleep at night. That's your history. It happened 80 trillion years ago. That's your history. Doesn't make any difference who it was that went to sleep and woke up in the morning. It's still your history because it happened before you. 2 minutes ago is your history. Anything that happened anywhere in the universe 8 seconds ago is your history. Well, maybe it might not be your history. Depends on what you want to look at, whether or not you want to put it in a box. But it's certainly my history. According to what? According to logic. It has to be my history. I mean, how can you put history in a box? History is everything that ever happened. Any kind of history. Everything that ever happened. Every cat that ever climbed a tree in 2008 is a part of my history. Why? Because it happened. And I was here when it happened. And even if I hadn't been here, if I was just born today, it would be a part of my history because it did happen. The cat did climb the tree. Now, a person might say, well, no, your history is only what you had something to do with. Well, if you look at it like that, logically speaking, how many people can look at just what they did since they have been here and say that's all of their history? Just what they did. The number of times that they crossed the street, the number of times that they caught a bus, the number of times that they drove a car. Well, if you look at history that way, you haven't done very much with the history that you have. But if you're going to include other people and other things and other environments, you're really talking about the beginning of time and even before the beginning of time. According to what? According to logic. Because if we're going to solve problems, that's the first thing we should start looking for. Logic. Which is what white supremacists say is something that black people can't deal with. They say that is the main difference between a white supremacist and a Negro. A Negro is not logical. Their minds won't stretch that far. They always think in little tiny boxes.
I wanted to get your perspective. I heard different folks sharing the thought that they feel that one of the reasons that we have not been more effective in placing racism, white supremacy with justice is that we have not established institutions and an actual building, an actual place to carry out counter-racism, to carry out an actual program and to actually have it go beyond just an individual. So if an individual, Dr. Welsing, for instance, having an actual building where she can do her white theory of white genetic annihilation and can teach that to people so it can be codified and can go beyond her. So when she passes on, her work continues and it's in an actual place. That not having a physical institution is why we have not been more effective at combating racism, white supremacy. Do you think that's accurate? The fact that we haven't been able to establish an actual building to carry out counter-racism?
Well, it's been my observation of buildings and the history of buildings. People in the early 60s, I'm just going by what I've been told and what I haven't even seen them. But I heard that there are some buildings called the pyramids. And I heard that people talking about, nobody knows how to put together and all like that. All the people who put it together are long gone and all like, and people have been studying them for centuries and all like that. And they're sitting there. And so, logically speaking, what does that mean in a functional sense? There are buildings, the pyramids in Egypt. And I understand that people go there and they take pictures and they walk around and they look at them. And some people climb them. And some people sit and look at them. And some people drive camels past them. And other people drive touring cars past them. Some movies are made around them. And then people go wherever they go. Then there are other buildings, here and there all over the world, all kinds of buildings. What is an institution? I've been trying to find that out. What exactly is an institution? Now, the compensatory definition of an institution, if you use an example, is the system, white supremacy. That's an institution. And who are the people, the keepers of the institution? Every white supremacist, everywhere they go, as individuals. As individuals. They don't have to be shoulder to shoulder, walking down a street, or huddled on a ship. You don't have to be a crowd. They carry with them the white code. I've sometimes given the example of the so-called Marine Code. Some people have said they can spot an ex-Marine. Why? Is he an institution? He says, well, yeah. He will say that, some of them. I'm a Marine. Enough said. They say, well, what does that mean? It means I'm a Marine. That's what that means. The compensatory view, given what I call the compensatory counter-races example and also the universal example, is universal man and universal woman. They would be institutions. That's the institutions that need to be established, meaning people who can function to the max everywhere they go, not people who have huddle. First of all, build a building and then go and huddle shoulder to shoulder in that building and then turn and look at each other every 5 minutes like they can somehow gain strength from that. Well, if that was true, you can call a slave ship an institution. Because you had plenty of black people huddled together. Black people have this thing of if they're huddled together, like football players, in a huddle. That means power. That means something real out of this world is going to happen right now or within a few minutes. That's black people's idea of an institution. An institution is a person who has a brain that tells them, him or her, put me in any environment and I can function in a constructive manner to the max. That's a real institution. So what is this institution, this building? The building is the brain. Everything flows to people who build buildings, so-called institutions. That building down the street is not an institution. It's a building. It's brick and mortar. Someone came and put it together because they used logic to do that. And where did the logic come from? Came out of the brain. The white supremacists understand that. That's how just one of them can walk into an environment. On many occasions, not in all, because some are more institutionalized than others. Some of them, it just takes one of them to walk into an environment and change that whole environment. 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, ears, but they got a brain that functions differently from all the other thousands of people who are right there in that same place. That's an institution, an institutionalized brain. That's where things come from. It's issued to each individual, whatever created brains. But black people have been, quote, unquote, brainwashed into thinking that an institution is some building somewhere up some mountaintop. And they cannot function unless they can climb that mountain and get to that building. The white supremacists just laugh at that kind of logic and say, as long as they think like that, I'll just be in charge of all the mortar and all the bricks and everything. And they'll never have an institution, and they'll never be able to think either because they think that they can't think. unless they are huddled somewhere in some building shoulder to shoulder, singing songs and beating drums. I'll blow them, the songs and the drums away.
Mm. Mm.
With just one of my muskets. The people are shallow thinkers. They don't understand that they have all of the equipment that they need right there in their heads. But they don't even want a head. That's why they use drugs. They want to just cancel out the brain, let somebody else do all the thinking. And the white supremacists say, I'll do the thinking. You just do the acting when I tell you to act. So you become a robot for me because your brain doesn't function. You don't even want it to function. You get mad at it if it seems like it's fixing to function. You're afraid of it functioning. And that's why you like to walk around talking about your ancestors and talk about how great you are and brag about how you are already. Not trying to improve at all. Just want to brag about what you are this minute. And what you are, what I have met you, a victim and a beggar. And you don't want to improve on that by using your brain. If somebody says anything about improvement, you start talking about how great your ancestors were. Because you want to keep doing what you're doing, which is nothing. It's a grand cop-out. A sport enjoyed by all of you people. That's the white supremacist view. And it's accurate. So far. But it doesn't have to be.
Wow. Context of white supremacy, I guess Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. The institution of racism, white supremacy, is racist man and racist woman. We've even had white people come on this show and say that the problem is white people. If there was a means of exterminating all of the white people on the planet, do you think that should be done to solve this problem of racism, white supremacy?
No.
Why not?
Because it's not logical. You don't try to commit genocide against anything that you didn't create, that you can't prove to yourself, telling yourself the truth. Now, some people say that, well, black people created white people. Well, the logic says that people, whether they're white or non-white, don't create anything. I've said that before in this very discussion. People arrange what has been created. A person will look at something and say, I created that. Well, you created it out of what? Well, I made it out of some wood, and I found some lumber and whatnot, and I put together and whatnot. Then I got some metal and whatnot out of the ground, and then I got some clay, and then I mixed it up, and I did this and I did that. But the person is just saying that they made it out of something. So that's arranging. That's not creating. Just like I said about sound earlier. You don't create sound, you arrange sound. Because sound came into the universe. Whatever created the universe created sound. And we shouldn't be so arrogant as to take credit for something we didn't do, and that includes being black. To go around saying, I'm proud to be black, that's a form of insanity. And it's certainly arrogance if it's not insanity. Because I'm saying that I did it. I'm black because I did it. You didn't do no such thing. You woke up one day and you were told that you were black, mostly by somebody was white. Never paid any attention to it before. And even if you did, so what? That's just like saying I have ears. So you got ears. You got ears because they were given to you. So shut up and get some work done. Just going around bragging about having ears all day long. See, I got ears. I'm proud. And you can tell that person, well, I heard you. I got ears too. So, what do we do now? Are we supposed to be doing something other than just bragging about what we got or what our grandfather had? Do you have any agenda? Do you have any plans? You got a brain? What about using that? I got a brain, but I want you to pay attention to my skin, and I want you to know I'm proud of my skin. Well, you didn't have anything to do with making your skin. Just like you didn't have anything to do with making your brain. And you should be glad of that, with the way you're using the one you got. And that's how we should talk to ourselves. We should talk to ourselves rather than try to prove how great we are through the white supremacists, because they already know better. Yeah, you people are great. You built the pyramids, you did this, you did that. They were great kings and queens. You love to say that like that's a big deal. Kings and queens on welfare, just like you are. Only thing about it, they get more than you. That's what they say. See, they don't think on a simplistic, childlike level like we do. That's why they call us boys and girls, boys and gals, simple-minded people. Just giggling all day and bragging on themselves. And then after they get through giggling and bragging, then they start fighting each other. That's about the extent of their intelligence. Wake up and smell the coffee.
Mm. You said you do not think it is correct to try to commit genocide against white people, and you said the reason is because black people do not create people. The Creator put white people here, and we should not look to exterminate them. Am I paraphrasing you correctly?
Correct. We should arrange what's already here, arrange people, arrange our minds, and do the things that are constructive. Everything is constructive and non-constructive. The white supremacists believe in building up to tear down. They'll build up people. They'll help you get, a lot of learning and whatnot. And then turn that learning into a whole bunch of mess. They do that because they think it's fun. We don't need that kind of criminal activity no more. Had enough of it. Had thousands of years of it. Shouldn't even think like that at this late day in history. But the white supremacists believing in that type of thing and in poisoning us with the same thing, they're victims. And so we chase after doing the same things that they have done. Same way. Only we want to do it in blackface, which is pure nonsense. We should go further. We should go further than anyone has ever gone into what people really should be and enjoy doing it. And I'm not talking about restrictions. I'm talking about actual pure liberation, as we call it. We don't even have an idea of what's that really like because we've never achieved it. The white supremacists have never achieved it and don't intend to as long as they're white supremacists. And we shouldn't be trying to duplicate the nonsense that they have done. That doesn't make sense. But a lot of us, because we don't know any better, don't want to do any better, just think that we should just try to duplicate what they have done. Try to become bigger gangsters. Rather than say enough already of that kind of nonsense. Don't mistreat anybody. Ever. Don't even think about it. And help the people who need help the most and give them the most constructive help. and then get in balance with the other things around you, the water, the air, which is all messed up. Which is why your premises go about just messing stuff up. Because that's what you do when you go on a rampage. First of all, mistreating people, then you'll mistreat everything. Once you get on that kick, and they enjoy it, and they teach it to everybody else. Insist on it. They do it very skillfully, but you can skillfully destroy. But we shouldn't be trying to learn how to do that, except to learn how they do it so we can stop them.
Wanted to make sure I'm being respectful with your time. You said you wanted to hang out for about an hour. We're at the hour mark.
I can answer a few more questions, and then.
Oh, okay. I'm going to switch to the phone line if that's acceptable, because a lot of people did call.
Or unless you had some more questions, either way.
Okay. I do, but since a lot of people called in, I'm going to defer and let them ask a few questions since there's quite a few folks. So I'll just save mine and I'll just go to the phone line. If you would like to call in, if you want to ask Mr. Fuller a quick question, you can dial in 347-215-6071. You can dial that number, or you can dial the other number. The other number is 760-569-7676, and the code is 948656. So the number again is 760-569-7676, and the code is 948656. Person who called in, actually, I'm going to double check to see Justice. If you are on the line, Justice, if you're on the line and you would like to ask a question, your line is open. Please go right ahead.
Greetings, Mr. Fuller. I believe a part of your code is to explain truth in a way that younger people can understand. I'm 11 years old. Please attempt to explain things in a way I can understand. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Did you have a question?
Yes.
I appreciate your call. But were you asking me a question?
I'm about to ask you a question right now. What do the definitions in your book, The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, a textbook workbook for thought, speech, and or action for victims of racism, white supremacy, do to replace white supremacy with justice?
Okay, what is the definition? I think that question. That means the United Independent means we should be united, not with each other. When I say we, I mean the victims of racism. We should be united with a concept. That's why the last word is concept, the concept of justice. That way we don't follow each other, because each and every individual makes mistakes. So if you're following someone and that person makes a mistake, and all people do make mistakes, you will make the same mistake that person made. But if you follow a concept, the concept of logic that came with the universe, like 1 and 1 is 2, you'll always go and wind up in the direction and at the place that you should be in your thinking and in your action, because you are following something that's solid. You are following something about universal law. Because people are poisoned. All people are poisoned. We've been poisoned by the kind of ideologies that have been handed to us and the kind of environment that has been handed to us. Even the water that we drink, the air that we breathe, it's all full of poison. And so things are out of balance. So therefore, we are out of balance. We have to know that. All people are out of balance, white and non-white. So you unite with something that will get you in balance. eventually, hopefully in a very swift manner. And you're independent. Independent means you are an individual. You don't give up your individuality. That's why I put that united-independent. United with what you're trying to do and with everybody else who's trying to do the same thing. But you do it as an individual because you are an individual. You're not welded to someone else. There are no two people on the planet who are exactly alike because they're not supposed to be, because everybody has an individual assignment. You should give a regard to that assignment. And you will know what that assignment is because it will be in the form of a problem, and that problem will be right in front of you every day. So that's your assignment. Work on the problem that's right in front of you. That's the problem-solving process. Compensatory means making up for what's missing. What's missing? Justice and correctness, which is what we're supposed to be trying to produce. It's never been done by anybody in recorded history that we know about, that we can really all believe in and agree on. But it can be done because we can think of it. Anything that people cause, anything that people put together, people can take apart. Justice is to the people and put together because people are people who need non-justice. People threw people out of balance. So people can put people back in balance, if there ever was a balance to start with. But it can be done. Guaranteeing that no person is mistreated, guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. Very simple formula. So that's compensatory, making up for what's missing. Code means, and system means, you have a set way of going about doing everything that you do every day. And how do you find out? By trial and error. Constructive, non-constructive. If what you do turns out to be constructive, then you stick with that. If it turns out to be non-constructive, you stop doing it. Try to find something that will work, that is constructive. And this will eventually, hopefully, very swiftly, depends on how fast you move, it will end not only the system of racism, it will produce justice, because justice and racism cannot exist in the same planet at the same time. That's a mathematical equation. You can't have racism and justice on the same planet at the same time. It's impossible. So it's going to be one or the other. But if you get justice, racism automatically goes. I think that's as far as I can go with that. The capsule. Hello?
Why did you write a book about thought, speech, and action?
About thought, speech, and action? Because when you wake up every day, you wake up thinking. That's the first thing you do. Because how do you know that you're thinking? Because you start moving. And you start talking to somebody, well, there you have it. Thought, speech, and action. And, of course, speech is a form of action. So every time you make a move, you want that move to be in one of two categories, constructive or non-constructive, and you want to be in the constructive category from the time that you get up in the morning to the time you go to bed at night. When you go to bed at night, you're sleeping. Your body's at rest, and your mind is getting a little rest from those nice thoughts that you have, constructive thoughts that you had all day. Your mind is geared up so that you can have constructive thoughts for the next day. Things that produce a good result. Because whatever you think about, that's what you're likely to do. Some people have very non-constructive thoughts. They have destructive thoughts. So they wake up or they go to bed, sometimes thinking of making contact with people or things and doing harm. That's what they're really thinking about. And what they're thinking about is what they'll do. If they keep thinking about it, they'll probably do it because it's on their minds. If it's on their minds, something destructive is on their minds, it doesn't leave space for something constructive to come in. So they do non-constructive things that they're thinking about, most likely. And the record shows that this is usually what happens. So that's what thought, speech, and action is all about. First, you think about doing the correct thing. Then you speak about it. I hope that that's what we're doing right now. And then we act on what we're thinking, what we're speaking about. Thought, speech, and action.
Why do you talk about name-calling in your book?
Why did I talk about what?
Why do you talk about
name-calling
in your book?
Because people shouldn't name-call. You shouldn't call anybody any name except the name that the person wants to be called. For example, if a person tells you in the morning, my name is Mary Jones, so you call her Mary Jones. You call her by any other name except Mary Jones. And maybe the next day, she might say, I have a nickname, and that nickname is Keisha. So you say, okay, Mary Jones, do you want me to call you Mary, or do you want me to call you Keisha? And she might say, call me Keisha, because I don't like me. I don't like Mary. So what do? You call her Keisha. Why? Because you always call people by the names and titles that they want to be called. Now, suppose someone calls you a name that you don't want them to call you. What you do is tell that person what your name is and ask them to call you by the name you want to be called. Now, suppose they refuse to do that and say, no, I'm going to call you what I want to call you. Then you say nothing else. You let the person call you by the name that they want to call you because you have already gone as far as you can go. You have been courteous. You have made the request. They have turned down your request. So whatever they call you, that's okay. Don't get angry about it because whatever you call yourself is more important than what other people call you. That's very important to remember for the rest of the time that you're on the planet and beyond. Don't get excited about what somebody else calls you as far as name calling is concerned. Whatever they call you, that's their business. Your business is you know who you are. You know who you want to be called. You know what you call yourself. That's what's important. Don't react to what everybody else on the planet does. There are a lot of people on the planet, and they do all sorts of things. You'll run yourself crazy trying to get everybody to do what you want them to do when they talk. Let them talk. You just make sure that when you talk, you're saying the correct thing.
If a white person is mistreating you, how would you deal with that?
Try to get away from the mistreatment, and if you can't get away from it, try to stop it by the most efficient means. Any type of mistreatment from anyone. That's what it's all about. You're trying to eliminate mistreatment. You always start by asking. You always start by asking people, please don't mistreat me. Please. I'm asking. Always ask for what should be given. And if they continue to do it, then you try to codify the best way to go about stopping the mistreatment, because that is every creature on the planet, on this planet or any other planet, any other organism. I mean, mistreatment you're supposed to be against mistreatment. You don't speak in favor of mistreatment at any time. Always speak in favor of correct treatment to everybody. Anybody who's being mistreated, you're supposed to do whatever you can. Get some help from anybody who is also opposed to mistreatment. But first thing you do is ask. You ask the person who is doing the mistreatment to stop it. Then you ask for some help. You let people know that you're being mistreated. Point out the person who is causing the mistreatment, because you have already asked them to stop. And if you didn't, you try to get the help. And ultimately, if you don't get any help, you try to stop the mistreatment the best way that you can, because you're not supposed to be mistreated. But you have to figure out a way under codification, meaning you have to think, use the brain that you have been issued, to try to figure out the best way, put a stop to the mistreatment, because you want to do it in the best way. You don't want to solve a problem by making another problem. That's a part of the codification. Solve problem without making any. So you don't want to make your problem bigger. So that means you have to do some thinking. You might have to go and sit somewhere quietly, maybe for days, and figure out exactly the best way to go about stopping the mistreatment. Because you're not supposed to be mistreated, ever. But people will mistreat people. Most people have been taught that mistreatment of people is fun. Because in the system of racism, that's all about mistreatment. They believe in mistreatment. They believe that that is the way to spend all of your time, mistreating people. That's their belief. And they've taught it to too many people for too long.
I know that you are still on this show, but how has being on this show helped you to replace white supremacy with justice?
By, first of all, speaking about it. First, I thought about it. I wrote a book on it. And writing is a form of speaking. And calling it to people's attention, that is the major problem on the planet. There are a lot of problems on the planet, but you can't solve any of these problems, any of the big ones. You might can solve a few little ones, but you can't solve any of the major problems, major meaning the big problems, without solving the problem of racism. And anybody who has ever tried it has found that out. And in any area of activity, economics, education, if you're talking about schools and all like that, you have to argue about what color somebody is. That's a problem. Shouldn't be any argument about that. There's plenty of arguments about it. Entertainment, the way people entertain themselves, whether it's going to be constructive or non-constructive. The white supremacists believe in twisting entertainment in such a way that it will have a few constructive things in it and a lot of non-constructive things in it. You have to be able to pick out what is and what isn't, because they mix up the two to confuse people, so that the people become confused about what is constructive entertainment and what is not. The way that people work, same thing. Law for certain. What they call laws. They make laws that look like they're the correct thing, but don't wind up producing justice. Laws change, but justice, hypothetically, will remain the same once it is established. It's never been done. laws should help to produce justice. They haven't done it so far. No law, no set of laws has achieved that as you. Politics is nothing but people relations. If you're talking to a person, we're engaged in politics right now because we're talking. That's all politics is. It's not going to the poll and voting. Politics is any time you talk to someone, they're talking to you or they're listening to you, or vice versa. That's politics, basic politics. And politics should be constructive, just like everything else. Religion is a strong belief backed up by action. And you have strong beliefs about producing justice and then back it up by doing the things that you think will keep people from being mistreated and helping people who need help the most. That would be an excellent religion. Lots of people have the label of religion, but they don't practice the religion that they claim that they have. And you should always expect people, or you should ask people to practice the religion that they say that they have. To practice their religion, whatever it is, by first asking them what does their religion require them to do. And particularly, what does their religion require them to do when they are talking to you or interacting with you or going someplace with you, so that you will know what to expect. And, of course, sex, which is something that has to do with male and female interaction. That's anytime a male is talking to a female, that is a sexual consideration because they are not of the same sex, and they're not supposed to be. You have two categories of people when it comes to sex, male and female. If in the correct environment it works the way that it should, that takes care of itself in a correct environment. But we are not in a correct environment. So that is real messy. And you have to have a lot of guidance when it comes to that. And, of course, war. That's the ninth area of activity. You're going to do away with war altogether. People are not supposed to be slaughtering each other. People are supposed to be able to sit down and talk. But as long as you have the system of white supremacy, you will have people who are killing each other. And you try to minimize that as much as you possibly can by speaking against it and acting against it when you have the power to do so. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, that does answer my question. I don't have any more questions, so I just
those are
thank
some
you for
excellent
being on.
questions.
Thank you.
Those are
And
some
thank you for
excellent
being
questions. And thank you for asking the questions, because for every question there's an answer, even if the answer is, I don't know. And there are a lot of things I don't know, and I'm still learning too.
Let's see. Person who dialed in, last four digits are 5827. Thank you for holding patiently. Your line is open if you would like to ask Mr. Fuller a question. Person who dialed in, last four digits 5827. Did you want to ask Mr. Fuller a question? All righty. Person who dialed in, last four digits 7259. 7259. Did you want to ask Mr. Fuller a question?
Yes, sir. Thank you for taking my call, and I'd like to also wish and say thank you to Dr. Fuller. I'm Brother Adrian out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I wanted to know, I've heard Dr. Fuller say how us as black people, how we should stay away from each other for non-constructive reasons. I would like to know why we should stay away from each other for non-constructive reasons.
Oh, for the reason you just keep yourself. non-constructive. Everything is either constructive or non-constructive. There's no point in looking for someone to engage in something that's non-constructive, because everybody usually winds up regretting it. And that's one of the most important things that black people can do. All down through the years, you've probably heard almost a slang expression. Black people need to come together. No, it's just the opposite. Black people need to stay away from each other until, as individuals, and when I say that, I want that to be qualified within context, until each individual black person can think of something constructive to say or do. Then it's the only time you get on a cell phone or the only time you go to someone's place of residence and visit. That's the only time. And if it takes you 10 years to think of something constructive, some constructive reason for contacting that person, well, you just wait 10 years. Because if you can't think of anything that is solidly constructive to do or say, you shouldn't even be within voice range of whoever that person is or whomever the persons are. And that includes relatives, that includes kin, that's long-time acquaintances. No contact, no conflict. That's a part of the code. You only make contact when you have a constructive plan that you know will work, or you have every reason to believe will work, because you have thought it over in fine detail. So now you make contact with this person. And as soon as you make contact, and whatever it is, whatever the reason is that you made contact, you engage in that constructive activity, and as soon as the activity is completed, even if it's something like just painting the garage, as soon as that activity is completed, do not hang around, not 5 minutes. Pick up your painting equipment, put it in the back of the truck, smile and wave, and say you had an excellent day, it was lots of fun, and I'll see you next time. And go. And don't come back until you have something else constructive in mind. And everybody should do you the same way. Now, what will this do? If this was done all over the world, even as we speak, most of the problems that black people have, we would be almost over the top in solving them. Because what would that mean? Logically speaking, that black people are about constructive activity. Otherwise, they don't even come in contact with anybody unless it's about something constructive. They deliberately do this. Why? Because we know that we all carry poison. If we're just hanging around with no constructive agenda, all of that poison is going to slowly come to the surface. And we become some of the most destructive people on the planet. And we become very, very, very unpleasant to be around. And we know this, but we keep doing it out of habit. And that's a habit that should stop. And that's something that we can have control over. We don't have control over very many things. That's something that we can control. We don't have to come in contact with each other. In fact, if we don't have anything constructive to say or do, when we see each other coming, we should go the other way. I've said that repeatedly, and that's one you can probably remember. If you don't have anything constructive to say or do, then go the other way. Because we have a tendency, when we don't have something constructive planned, when we just come up there and high-five and then stand around looking for something to say, it usually means trouble in the long run, and sometimes in the very short run. Sometimes within 15 minutes, you hear the pop, pop, pop of 9 millimeters. We become famous for that. And that should stop. That is a part of the tradition that should stop, and that's something that we can control without asking anybody anything. We can do that. say that we're going to be a constructive agenda from now on. No contact, no conflict. The only time we have contact is when we have a well laid out plan to do something constructive. I'm not talking about a well laid out plan to go rob somebody. That's not constructive.
Let's see. The person who called in, last four digits, 0775, 0775. Your line is open. Did you have a question for Mr. Fuller?
Yes, I do. Do you hear me?
Man, you have a lot of background noise on your end. If you are listening to the show, can you turn your volume down, or if you could get to a quiet spot, because it's causing a lot of distortion in the line. I'm going to try it again. Your line should be open. Hopefully you got the back. Okay, much better.
Do you hear
Thank
me?
you. Go right ahead.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Mr. Fuller. I have a question. Do you have children, and were you able to teach them the compensatory code, and how has it affected the next generation of your family? And I also wanted to know when you were coming out with your next book.
Okay. Yes, and but I tell people, I'm often asked, what do you tell young people? You tell young people the same thing you tell old people. It has nothing to do with age. You tell them the truth, but you tell them in such a way that they understand what you're saying. Sometimes people who have a lot of years on this planet, when you tell them things, they don't understand what you're saying. So you always have to judge. You have to use your judgment with each individual before you say anything, and try to perceive whether or not the person will understand what you are saying. Because if the person doesn't understand what you're saying, what you're doing is spreading confusion. And that's one thing that you definitely don't want to do. So how do you really know when a young person wants to know the answer to a question? It's when they ask the question. That's the best time. Because when a person has a question on his or her mind at any age, it means they're ready for an answer. And it's easier to talk to the person. So you don't, what you call indoctrinate people. That's not a part of the compensatory process. Indoctrination means you talk to a person and you keep telling them, well, you do this and you think this because I said so. No. You tell them in such a way that is logical to them so that they can think for themselves. They can see the reasoning in what you're saying. The answers to a younger person or an older person could never be think this or do this because I said so. That's not the way to get people to logically reason on their own. That's not the best way to communicate. That's a way to dictate, and people become resentful of that too. As they grow, they become more and more resentful of people telling them anything, when the reason for telling them is because I said so. That should never, never, ever be the response, regardless of the age of the person. If you make a statement, I'll make a suggestion, you can say, now, I think that you should do this, and the reason is, and then give the logical reason, and try to give it in such a way that they understand what you're saying and why you're saying it. And most people comprehend that type of approach. Always be ready to give the reason, and the reason should be logical, something that works in a constructive manner, something that they can put a test to themselves, and they will see the logic. That's the procedure. People of any age, I want to emphasize that, doesn't make any difference. And it's best to tell them when they are in the questioning mode. When the person asks a question, that's usually when they're most receptive to receive an answer. And now, the second question was?
Your book. When is your second?
Oh, the next book.
Yes, sir.
Well, It's in a compensatory fashion. I'm always working on it and trying to get out a word guide sometimes early next year. That's a word guide. That's like I had on the book that's out there now. It has a word section. I'm going to put out a word guide where I'm more specific and I have a lot more words that I have presented in there. And then the updated version of the current book, I hope to have out sometimes late next year or early the year after, because it's not easy to produce codified material, not for me. And it's easy for some people. Some people can be very, what you call, prolific. I am not prolific at all. I move very slowly, in my writing and in my thinking. I'm a very slow thinker and a very slow learner. But I try to get there.
The person who called in, last four digits 1647, 1647. If you had a question for Mr. Fuller, your line is open. 1647, last four digits 1647. Did you have a question? Okay. Person who called in, last four digits 3493, 3493. Did you have a question for Mr. Fuller?
Well, mine is more of a statement, not a question, but he can comment on it after I completed here. You say that we're a universal people. And first I want to know, do you believe in universal law, Mr. Fuller?
Universal law?
Universal law.
Do I believe in universal law?
Yes, sir.
Well, there are a lot of universal laws, so I believe in all of them.
Okay.
Are used because some people. Hello, go ahead.
What I'm getting at is on the question of justice. You say that we're universal people, and in the universe there are certain laws that govern the said universe. One of these laws is the law of karma, the law of return, reciprocity, whatever you want to call it. But pertaining to the white supremacists, justice for them would be for them to receive exactly what they have put out and given to us. So if they were to be hung, thrown in ghettos, branded, castrated, sterilized, and whatever they've done to us, they were to receive that double-folded, pressed down, and 10 times over. That would be justice for them. You stated earlier that we should not think about committing genocide on the white supremacists because we didn't create them. But if they were created out of the universe, then they are subject to these laws. So in order for these laws to be enacted here on this planet, it would have to have a human body to do these things back to these people. So if we were to do these things to these people, that would be justice. What do you think about that?
You mean do unto others the things that people do to you?
That's universal law.
Is that what you're saying?
Justice. Yes, sir. That's universal justice. For them to receive exactly what they've given to us, by our hands.
No, I have said previously that genocide should not be something that any people should be guilty of, regardless of the circumstances, because that's genocide. In other words, wiping people out and then standing there looking at dead bodies and call that a great accomplishment. That's the white supremacist thinking, which is what I say should be done away with, and replace it with a better system. That system would be guaranteeing that no person is mistreated from this point on, or whatever point that you can start at, where you can make that a guarantee. No person being mistreated. And the person who needs help the most getting the most constructive help. Now, once you set that system up, in order to keep it, if a person is going to deliberately go ahead and harm somebody, in spite of the understanding that no one is supposed to be mistreated, but you have someone who's going to kill someone deliberately, whether that person is white or non-white. Then what you do is take that person and put them into what is called compensatory, maximum emergency compensatory confinement. That would be the correct title for it, I believe. And you put them in there with whatever instrument they use to cause the death of the other person. That instrument would be that person's friend, because that was their coordinate in killing someone else. If they used a gun, most likely in this day and time, that would be the preferred instrument. It would be the best instrument to use. And if they used a knife or an axe or something like that, that's not as efficient as a gun. So you would put the person in confinement with the weapon used or one similar to it if you couldn't find the weapon that was used. And the person would stay there with their friend, the friend meaning the instrument that they used. They would be fed once a day. They would be there in total silence. And they would stay there until they decide to do to themselves what they did to the other person. Now, since they made the decision to kill the other person, this person made the decision to do that. The logical and the closest thing you can get to justice would be for the person to do to themselves what they did to somebody else. See, and this is a message that's being sent. Anything that you put out, someone else is you for doing it. You punish someone else. So now, if it's going to be a punishment, you should punish yourself. So you're given an opportunity to punish yourself just like you punished the other person. You get what you put out. Nobody else is going to be hired, like the current system in most places is to hire someone to kill someone else. That's a hired gun. An executioner is a hired gun. You don't want any more of that, or you shouldn't want any more. That's not balance. That's still worship and death. The message should be sent is that you take someone out of this planet, you should be willing to go to. Preferably the same moment. The same moment that you send someone else, because if you are still here 5 minutes after the other person is gone that you killed, that means you got 5 minutes that they didn't get. So you should try to run, catch up with him as fast as you can, if you are a correct thinking person. What the white supremacists have done has glamorized murder, has glamorized killing, has made killing fun. Maximum emergency compensatory confinement will be an instrument or a procedure for taking all of the fun out of killing.
The person who called in last four digits, 7012, 7012. Did you have a question for Mr. Fuller?
No, thanks, Gus. I was just listening. Thank you, Mr. Fuller.
Thank you
for coming on.
Thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you. And I'll have just a few more minutes, and then I'm going to have to depart, but I will take maybe another question.
Okay. Mr. Nero, if you have a question for Mr. Fuller, your line should be open.
Greetings. May I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you, Mr. Fuller, for coming on the Cows. It's always a pleasure, as well as informative to listen to you, sir. I do have a question. One of the things you brought up, I missed most of the show, but correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not that smart. But is it logical for me to suspect whatever created white people is also a racist?
Whatever created white people is also a racist?
Yeah, is it logical for me to suspect that? Yes.
No, I wouldn't think that, because the man can make choices. Whatever created white people also created non-white people, black people, all people do things they shouldn't do. So we could blame the Creator for making a mess of the universe that was created, but then we would have to say that the creation itself is a mess, and the creators, the Big Bang, Jehovah, Allah, God, the Great Spirit, is a mess maker. We could say that. There are some people who believe that. But experience has taught the people on this planet that there are things that can be done by people that do make sense and that are constructive. People have proven that they are capable of doing something that is constructive. And they are capable of doing many things, and they have certainly proven that are vastly non-constructive. So I don't think that, just considering the time that we have here on the planet, we don't even have to think about what the Creator may have had in mind with the kind of things that we are looking at. But we can think about what is the best way to go about doing things with the few days that we have here on this planet that we have been given, because it's all. So we can put it in those two categories. We do know about the categories: constructive, non-constructive. So when I figure out how we can build institutions to curse the Creator, we can just figure out and use that energy to figure out how to improve ourselves in interacting with each other in the environment that we have been given to produce constructive results. Because there is reason to believe that you can do some things that are going to produce constructive results. And we should emphasize that with the little time that we have. The average person spends less than 100 years on this planet. Out of all the trillions of years and quadrillions of years, if you speak of it in terms of years, that have passed down through what we call time. So with the little time that we have, we might as well make it pleasant, make it constructive, because we can do that. And don't waste time and energy trying to figure out and spending a lot of time arguing with each other about whether or not we should gang up and try to figure out a way to do a job on the Creator, or do a job or continue to do jobs on each other, simply because that's been our pattern. Just try to do something that is better. Take a choice each day of doing something constructive rather than non-constructive. I think that's the best way. Don't waste a lot of time, because that would be wasted time, trying to get an army together to go against the Creator. I don't think that would be a constructive project. There are people who might disagree, but that's their choice to make.
Thank you, Mr. Nero. Wow. I am super grateful all the way through. Mr. Fuller was incredibly patient with me today. I was late getting in to do the program. I wasn't able to contact him, called him late about the program. Didn't skip a beat, was willing to come hang out, and he stayed an extra hour with us. Just incredibly generous with his time and energy. A scholar and a gentleman for sure. We are just super pleased.
Sometimes.
If you could let folks know how they could get your book, that would be great, sir.
Well, you can get it by contacting me directly. If it's a black bookstore in your area and whatnot that does carry it, then you can contact them, try to keep them in business wherever you happen to be. But if not, you can get it from me directly by calling 202-484-4673. 5461. That's 202-484-5461. Now, I'm not always available, but if you don't get me one time, try it some other time at your convenience. But that would be the procedure, and I can mail it to you directly. And that's 202-484-5461. And I thank you all for listening and participating.
The pleasure was ours, sir. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your Tuesday evening. We will definitely be in touch soon, and I hope you continue to take excellent care of yourself, sir.
Yes, sir. I hope I can do that, and I hope everybody out there does the same. That's a part of the codification. Try to take care of yourself in the most constructive manner so that you can help take care of somebody else. And have an excellent night.
Thank you, sir. You too.
Sure.
Bye.
There you go. Context of white supremacy. Thank you. And I thank the listeners. I was telling Jeannie yesterday, program, I'm not that nice of a person, and I think I've shown that to folks who've been listening in Blog Talk Radio, and I was telling them I don't know if people at War on the Horizon, since we've been simulcasting, if they've caught that yet, and he said, I think they have, but thank you, everybody, for being patient today. I was late getting started, just